There are many sports that carry risk. Motorsports, mountaineering, downhill skiing, so on and so on. In each of them, athletes push themselves into environments where mistakes can be serious, sometimes fatal. Yet in most of these disciplines, layers of safety have evolved over time. Protective equipment has improved, regulations have tightened, courses are designed with risk mitigation in mind. The danger is still present, but it is managed. Base jumping, however, is different. There are no stadiums, no governing body overseeing every jump, no mandatory safety buffers. Instead, there is a person, a parachute, and a fixed object, often a cliff face or a building, which are sometimes only a few hundred feet above the ground. The acronym BASE stands for Building, Antenna, Span and Earth. Those four categories describe the fixed objects which participants jump from. Unlike skydiving, which begins thousands of feet in the air with time to recover from mistakes, base jumping starts low, very low. In many cases, there is only a few seconds between stepping off the edge and impacting the ground. Over the last few decades, base jumping has developed a reputation as one of the most dangerous sports in the world. The fatality rate is significantly higher than traditional skydiving, and incidents occur with a frequency that continues to shock even experienced jumpers. Entire websites are dedicated to documenting the deaths of participants, listing names, dates, and locations in a growing archive that spans continents. This is not a sport with occasional tragedy. Risk is built into its foundation. So what is it? Well, let's talk about it. Base jumping as a recognizable sport began in the late 1970s in Yosemite National Park. At the time, parachuting itself was already well established, but almost all jumps were made from an aircraft at high altitude. The idea of stepping from a fixed object, particularly a sheer rock face, was viewed as reckless, even within the skydiving community. One of the key figures in turning it into something structured was Carl Boenish, a cinematographer and experienced skydiver. Boenish became fascinated with the idea of launching from cliffs rather than planes. In 1978, he and a small group of jumpers made a series of leaps from El Capitan in Yosemite, carefully documenting them on film. Those jumps are widely regarded as the birth of modern base jumping. It was Boenish who later formalized the acronym BASE, standing for Building, Antenna, Span and Earth. He did this to categorize the four types of fixed objects from which people jump. He even created a numbering system, issuing base numbers to jumpers who successfully completed at least one jump from each category. In the early years, equipment was basic. Parachutes were adapted from skydiving rigs that had been designed for far higher deployments. There were no purpose-built base canopies, no wingsuits, no widespread instruction network. Exit techniques were experimental, and miscalculations were common. Many of the first jumpers were essentially learning through trial and error, even though the risks were obvious. Unlike skydiving, where jumpers may exit at an aircraft at 10,000 to 15,000 feet, base jumps often begin between 300 and 1,000 feet. That dramatically reduces reaction time. In skydiving, a malfunctioning parachute can sometimes be cut away and replaced with a reserve. In low-altitude base jumping, there may not be enough height for that second chance. As the sport expanded, it also attracted increasing scrutiny from authorities, particularly in the United States. Base jumping was formally prohibited in the US national parks under federal regulations that restrict parachuting and air delivery activities without special permits. In places like Yosemite, where the sport had effectively been born, jumpers faced fines, arrest, and potential jail time if caught. As the sport spread beyond Yosemite in the 1980s and 1990s, it became more international. Jumpers travelled to Norwegian fjords, the Swiss Alps, and urban skylines across Europe and North America. New techniques were developed, canopies became more specialised, pilot chutes were adjusted for quicker deployment. Some safety improvements were introduced, but the fundamental reality never changed. The margin for error remained extremely small. Tragically, even one of the sport's founders would not escape that reality. In 1984, Carl Boenish was killed whilst base jumping from a cliff in Norway. His parachute opened, but he misjudged the landing area and struck the rocks at high speed. He was only 43 years old. His death did not end the sport, however. If anything, it cemented its mythology. From that point forward, base jumping grew not only as a discipline, but as a subculture. It was accepted that fatalities were not a rare exception, but recurring events, and as participation increased, so did too the number of disasters. Quick note here, it is also important to distinguish between traditional base jumping and wingsuit base jumping. Conventional base jumping is what we have just discussed, whereas wingsuit base jumping involves wearing a specialised suit with fabric stretched between the arms and legs, creating lift and allowing the jumper to glide forward at high speed before deploying the parachute. This extended flight makes it possible to cover greater horizontal distances and even fly alongside cliffs and ridge lines. Whilst it offers more control and longer airtime, it also introduced additional risk, particularly when flying close to terrain, as demonstrated by our next case of death. Perhaps the most infamous death in base jumping history, outside of Carl Boenish of course, was that of Dean Potter. By the time of his death in 2015, Potter was not just a base jumper, he was one of the most recognisable, innovative, and controversial figures in modern climbing and extreme sports. Born in 1972 at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and raised in New Hampshire, Potter did not follow a conventional path into athletics. He discovered climbing as a teenager and quickly became consumed by it, teaching himself multiple techniques and immersing himself in the climbing culture of the northeastern United States. He briefly attended the University of New Hampshire, but left college to pursue climbing full-time, a decision that would shape the rest of his life. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Potter established himself in Yosemite National Park as one of the most driven climbers of his generation. He completed major free solo ascents, speed climbs, and link-ups across iconic formations such as El Capitan, Half Dome, and Mount Watkins. Over time, however, Potter became increasingly drawn towards disciplines that removed even more protection. He embraced highlining, sometimes walking slack lines thousands of feet above the valley floor without a safety tether. He began base jumping and later wingsuit flying, exploring the sensation of human flight in its purest form. His career was not without public backlash. In 2006, he climbed Delicate Arch in Arches National Park, exploiting ambiguous regulations that did not explicitly prohibit climbing that specific formation at the time. The climb caused widespread criticism, particularly in Utah, where the arch is considered a symbol of the state's natural heritage. He lost sponsorships as a result, and park rules were later clarified to prevent similar ascents. Years later, he again drew divided reactions after releasing a film showing tandem wingsuit flyings with his dog. To supporters though, he represented freedom and authenticity. To critics, he represented unnecessary risk and disregard for consequence. He had become deeply committed to wingsuit proximity flying, one of the most technical, demanding and dangerous forms of base jumping. Unlike traditional base jumps, proximity flying involves steering a wingsuit along cliffs and ridge lines at extremely high speeds, often within meters of rock walls. Precision is critical. Small misjudgments in line choice, wind assessment, or body position can result in immediate impact. On May 16, 2015, Potter and fellow wingsuit pilot Graham Hunt attempted a proximity flight from the Taft Point in Yosemite. The line they chose required clearing a narrow notch in a rocky ridgeline before continuing into open space above Yosemite Valley. They had flown the route before and were experienced in the area, but base jumping is now illegal in US national parks, and many jumpers operate during early dawn or late dusk to avoid detection. Conditions late in the day can reduce visibility and depth perception, particularly in complex terrains. The two men jumped in close succession, with Potter's girlfriend recording the jump. A few seconds after, she heard a loud thumping noise, one after the other. She hoped it was the two men deploying their parachute, but obviously we know now it was not. During the flight, Graham Hunt struck the rock wall near the notch. This caused Potter to swerve to avoid him, resulting in him hitting the other side. Neither deployed their parachutes, both died instantly from the impact. Potter was 43 years old, and Graham was only 29. The reaction to his death was immediate and divided. Within the climbing and base communities, tributes described him as a visionary. Others questioned the necessity of the risk, particularly given that the jump was illegal. His death reignited debate over whether prohibiting base jumping in national parks may inadvertently increase the danger by pushing participants to jump in suboptimal conditions. Some argued that in places such as Chamonix, where base jumping is legal and more openly practiced, jumpers can wait for ideal weather and visibility, potentially reducing certain risks. Others maintain that the fundamental danger of wingsuit proximity flying remains regardless of regulation. What Potter's death ultimately demonstrated was that experience does not eliminate vulnerability when base jumping. He wasn't a novice, he had decades of experience, high climbs, and hundreds of flights, yet in a discipline where reaction time is measured in fractions of a second, even minor deviations can prove fatal. His passing became one of the most defining moments in modern base jumping history. Following the death of Dean Potter, another highly publicised fatality brought renewed attention to wingsuit proximity flying. In 2016, Alexandru Polli, one of the most recognisable wingsuit pilots in the world, was killed during a jump in the French Alps. Unlike many base jumpers who operated primarily within subculture circles, Polli had achieved global visibility through professionally filmed flight videos that showcased extreme precision flying through narrow gaps in mountainous terrain. Polli began as a competitive skier before transitioning into skydiving and eventually base jumping. Over time, he became known for a highly technical approach to wingsuit flying, studying aerodynamics and refining glide efficiency. He gained international attention in 2013 after releasing footage of himself flying through a natural rock arch in the Alps, a maneuver that required exact speed, angle and body control. The video went viral, accumulating millions of views and introducing wingsuit proximity flying to a far wider audience than it had already previously reached. By the mid-2010s, Polli was considered one of the leading figures in performance wingsuit flying. However, the discipline he specialised in inherently required flying within meters of rock faces at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. The precision that made the footage visually spectacular was the same that left no room for error. On August 22, 2016, he was attempting a wingsuit flight near Chamonix in France, one of Europe's most popular base jumping regions. During the descent, he collided with a tree whilst flying close to the mountainside. According to reports, he crashed at an altitude of 5,000 feet and was the second fatality that week in the base jumping community. From reading about it, even though his friends were extremely sad to hear the news, they weren't exactly shocked. It really is as simple as that. A minor miscalculation or an unexpected external factor leading to fatal consequences. One minute you're the best base jumper in the world, the next, you're dead. Whilst high-profile deaths draw the most attention, they represent only a small part of the overall reality. The danger of base jumping is not defined by one or two infamous incidents, but by the steady accumulation of fatalities over time. Unlike many organised sports, base jumping does not operate under a single governing body. There is no universal licence system, no mandatory reporting framework, and no centralised authority tracking every jump. Yet within the community, there exists a widely referenced record known as the BASE Fatality List, an ongoing documentation of known deaths associated with the sport. The list began in the early 1980s and now contains hundreds of names from across the world, each entry noting the date, location, and the basic circumstances of the incident. In some years, multiple deaths occur within the span of a few weeks. It shows us how frequent fatal accidents have been throughout the discipline's history. Certain locations, particularly in Europe, have seen repeated incidents over short periods of time. Like I mentioned earlier, the BASE Fatality List allows anyone to click through individual cases and read brief summaries of what has happened. It is constantly updated. In 2026 alone, there have already been multiple recorded deaths, and the year is only just beginning. The most recent one was just a few weeks ago. On February the 5th, 2026, a French jumper named William Bidot was added to that list. Reports indicated that the accident occurred during a jump attempt in the French mountains. Information released through community channels suggested that he slipped during the exit phase. In base jumping, the moment of exit is crucial. This is when they run and jump off the base. A stable body position is required to ensure clean separation from the object before deployment. If footing is lost or balance compromised, the jumper may not achieve proper orientation, drastically reducing the ability to recover. His friend said, "Arriving around 2:20 PM, he sent me a voice message and then a video of the exit he was clearing off snow. He took the time to remove all the snow from the rock, pissed on it to be sure, and was waiting for the rock to dry completely before jumping, but he was found at the bottom of the cliff in France 3 hours later. He was only 33 years old." The deadliest year recorded on the list was 2016, when 37 fatalities were documented. The second highest total came in 2024, with 33 recorded deaths. In total, the list now contains 537 documented fatalities worldwide. That number alone is striking, particularly when considering that base jumping remains a relatively small niche activity compared to mainstream sports. With numbers like this, the obvious question is why anyone continues to do it at all. The answer is not as simple as recklessness or ignorance. For many participants, base jumping, and particularly the wingsuit flying version of base jumping, represents something far deeper than adrenaline. It is often described as the closest human beings have ever come to unaided flight. There is also the aesthetic appeal. Many of the most famous wingsuit flights take place in dramatic alpine terrain. Vast valleys, steep limestone walls, snow-covered ridge lines. The footage can appear smooth, controlled and almost effortless. Online videos show pilots threading through natural rock formations, skimming along cliff faces and gliding over forests and rivers. To viewers, it can look like mastery, but beauty and danger exist side by side. For those inside the sport, the decision to jump is often framed not as a defiance of death, but as acceptance of risk. For those outside it, the same decision can appear incomprehensible. Both perspectives can exist at once. The names on the fatality list will continue to grow, and the debate around risk and responsibility will continue with them. I'll be interested to hear your perspective in the comments below, and may everyone who has died doing this rest in peace. As always, this is not an AI channel, I do everything myself, so if you appreciate my work, subscribe, and if you want to go that extra step to support the channel, maybe consider becoming a member. Let me know what you thought about this case in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.